Hi, I'm Nel Koszela reporting from Brussels. In this episode, we break down key developments in EU security and defense policy since the start of Danish EU Council presidency in July 2025, where Europe has been redefining its security posture in the world. For decades, European defense largely relied on NATO and US, but things are shifting. EU leaders have declared that Europe must become sovereign, more responsible for its own defense, and better equipped to act and deal autonomously. With 21 of member countries, also in NATO, the two remain close partners. But the EU now aims to stand on its own feet a bit more, developing military capabilities that complement NATO. Firstly, the EU is pouring money and effort into joint defense projects. Just a couple of weeks ago, the European Parliament approved a landmark plan to strengthen Europe's defense. It's called the European Defense Industry Programme. Basically, a new EU fund to help countries buy weapons together and build up Europe's arms production. European Defense Industry Programme is the first ever Europe-wide defense funding scheme of its own kind, with a budget of 1.5 billion. It's designed to make EU more self-reliant in defense manufacturing and reduce the need to import arms. In short, Europe wants to ensure its armies have the equipment they need, made right here in Europe. One great feature of this new program is by European rule. If EU government wants money from the fund, they have to spend it mostly on European-made parts. In fact, at least 65% of the components must be from Europe. No more relying heavily on foreign suppliers. Building up Europe's defense isn't just about the program, it's a whole mindset change. The European Commission proposed a plan called Rearm Europe. Its goal? Unlock massive new investments in defense across the continent. How massive? The Commission says it's up to 800 billion extra that could be spent in coming years under this plan. To make that happen, Brussels is trying to loosen some strings. One idea is to let EU governments spend more on their militaries without falling off the EU budget rules. Another is a giant joint EU weapons fund. The Commission has raised around 150 billion by issuing EU bonds and then lending that money cheaply to member states for defense projects. Think of it as a big collective piggy bank to help countries buy expensive systems together. None of it is law yet. The proposals are ambitious and some parts need unanimous backing from all member states. But with war back in Europe's neighborhood, there is a broad agreement that Europe has to step up. The hope is that by investing together and coordinating, Europe can deter threats and rely less on others. Ukraine remains at the heart of this story. Beyond existing financial and military support, the Europe New Defense Programme includes a dedicated Ukraine Support Fund to help modernize Ukraine's armed forces and defense industry. It's not just about today's war. It's about long-term bet on Ukraine's security and on more stable neighborhood for the EU. At the same time, NATO stays the cornerstone of European defense. The EU's push is meant to complement NATO, not compete with it. If Europeans invest more and build up their own capabilities, it relieves pressure on the US and makes the whole alliance stronger. Recent uncertainty in Washington over Ukraine aid was a wake-up call that Europe needs to be able to handle a crisis even when US politics are unpredictable. Security today isn't just tanks and jets. It's also who crosses borders and under what rules. In recent months, the EU has moved to tighten migration and asylum policies as many governments face pressure to reduce irregular arrivals. A new draft law, sometimes called Return Regulation, aims to speed up deportations of people who have no legal right to stay. It includes the idea of return hubs in third countries where migrants could be sent while their cases are proceeded or after their asylum claims are rejected. Supporters say this will deter dangerous journeys, but critics warn it risks human rights violation and undermines fair asylum procedures. There is also a quieter but crucial stand of security work, defending democracy itself. The EU is developing a Defense of Democracy package to protect elections and public debate from foreign interference and disinformation. The big question running through all of this is balance. How to make Europe safer without sacrificing the values that define it. What is clear is that the EU of 2025 is far more active and assertive on security and defense than it was 10 years ago. Things that once sounded theoretical, an EU defense industrial policy or a stronger common asylum system or tools to shield democracy, are now turning into a concrete laws and funding programs. Crises have pushed the EU to act together in new ways. And that's it for a shortened security and defense update from Brussels. In the rest of the episode, we'll dig deeper into what all this means in practice for Ukraine and for people on the move, and for everyday Europeans who want to feel safer without giving up their freedoms.
Hello, everyone. We are now into our third segment of episode one of our Common Future video podcast. I have here today with me actually three citizens who came here to discuss with me the topic of security. But lucky us, we got three citizens with actually that are very involved in the local society here in Denmark. So we have Bernardo Basilisi Menini, I guess that's the full name, the chief editor of
Kind
Copy
of like that.
with us.
Hi,
We have
everyone.
Manuela Sobral, the chairwoman of Sustainery. And we have actually a political candidate with us, Simone Giuseppe Ugheri, the lead candidate of the first ever Denmark's history political party for internationals, Billund International. That's quite an
Hello, everyone.
impressive thing. So, thank you all three for coming here today. We're gonna be discussing about Denmark's EU presidency and its main topic. And as you probably have seen, the main topic for Denmark has been actually security. That's a keyword that's even part of their, let's just say, motto of the presidency. They wanted more security for ourselves. Europe must defend itself. We must be able to, let's just say, be independent of any external support in terms of our security. So, Manuela, have you followed the debate? EU says that they want to be able to be ready to defend themselves by 2030. Is that realistic? Can we do that without the Americans?
Yes and no. I guess it really depends on what do you mean by independent in terms of do we have the capacity or do we have the meanings? If you ask me, do we have the military capacity to achieve NATO levels? No, but we also don't have to. We don't necessarily need to. What is the biggest challenge today here in Europe, at least from my perspective, is not exactly manpower, is not exactly weaponry, is coordination. Uh, you can see clear divide right now in terms of priorities, where the North countries and the Baltic countries have one perspective, and the south of Europe has a completely different perspective. I have family in Portugal, and I can tell you that in Portugal, people don't even know there is a war happening. So the biggest Italy is the same. The souther you go, more detached from the conflict. Here we are, and detached we are also from the military needs. So, can we become completely independent from NATO? Maybe, but then it depends a lot on how we're going to coordinate. But can we achieve the same level as NATO? No, but again, we don't have to.
I mean, when we're talking about independence or is Europe ready to defend itself by 2030, there's a few factors that we need to take into consideration, right? Number A, do we want to have a strong military? And can we have a united European military that can coordinate by a central commandment? Or do we have to go through the same logic of having everyone at the table, everyone has to agree, 27 generals, each of them having to
Yeah,
coordinate their own soldiers? That will be hell in terms of, let's just say, any sort of
it
fast
it
missions or defense. So the whole
with will.
European concept is dying, right?
Yes, I think you actually brought up it from a very interesting angle. When we talk about NATO, what is it that makes NATO necessary and relevant? Again, it's not the weaponry power, it's not the military power, but the fact that it works as the centralized intelligence that is capable of coordinating actors. The main issue with defense that we have without NATO is not the same amount of weaponry, again, as coordination. It represents a big challenge for EU, for sure, but I feel like it also represents a big opportunity for European Union to actually sit together and realize, are we really what we think we are? Or have we just become an economic union incapable of defending itself together. I think the main issue here is that the limits of what the union is are being tested. You say, well, the union is dying. I disagree. I don't think the union is dying. I think what is dying, perhaps, is our perspective that this is a complete union where all those 30 countries with completely different intentions, perspective, historical backgrounds, and understanding of the problems see as a united front. There is clearly many divides within EU. And until those divides are dealt with, there will be no military union to the level of coordination that NATO is capable of providing. So it's less about how much we invest in defense, and it's way more about how we coordinate the different actors within EU. It's not okay that Germany and France make the decisions together with Sweden and maybe Poland and completely disregard that you have Portugal in one end and Romania on the other end, and then they are not invited to the discussion table.
So
And their
basically,
interest.
are you suggesting that we should follow the same model like NATO, where we have a central command where it shouldn't matter that you're Polish, Romanian, or German, but you're just simply European?
I think what we need, first of all, is to decide what we want European Union to be.
Okay.
Until that is completely decided, nothing else can be decided.
So are you a federalist?
I'd rather not go into the details.
So that's one aspect, of course, is how we the give commands. But another aspect is, of course, do we even have weapons or a defense industry to support this army? Bernardo, what do you think? Do are we should we use our EU money for building our defense industry? Should we heavily subsidize it? What should we do?
Short answer, yes. Not because I like weapons or armies or war, because I dislike them, of course, but armies and weapons and blah, blah, blah are going to be purchased no matter what. That's something that will happen. And I think it's better if that happens within a European framework for three reasons. First, for defense purpose, together is better. Stronger is together. As simple as that equation. Point number two, because it may be dangerous if all the countries in Europe they rearm individually. Because at that
Yeah.
point, if conflicts arise in the future, you're going to have a lot of guys with a lot of weapons, and who may wanna point those weapons at each other, and that's going to be. I think that can be dangerous on the long run. Point number three, because I think I am a federalist. I think that Europe can be a very interesting perspective for European countries, and having a common defense, or at least a share or a higher share of common defense, can really push uh, towards that direction. So I think that yes, and I do agree with Manuela when she says that then there's the coordination, the apparatus, the organization, the also the political leadership of the military leadership, which is another chat, another thing, another page. But yes, I think that building a physical defense system or military system together, it's a starting point.
I mean, for Denmark, it has been a huge, let's just say, jolt. And every the military has organized like this how to become a supplier meetings in every region, and they were fully booked. Everyone wants a piece of this new money train. There's billions and billions being invested in the military right now, and everyone wants to be part of it, from carpenters to clothes makers to service providers to drone makers to whatever. Everyone can win somehow. So it gave a bit of a jolt to the economy, you can say, because you're putting literally 50 million. So now the choice is 50 billion into economy every year. So the choice is now, do we want to buy from abroad and give this money to another economy and at least take better technology, or should we strive that we keep it all in Europe, so somehow we only buy European?
Possibly buying European would help. I am not a big fan of saying that we should empower the military industry. This way, we can help our economy. Because otherwise, we could say the same with, I don't know, heavy drugs. Let's legalize cocaine simply because it's a market and we can tax it. No one would agree on that, and I wouldn't agree on that. and so we have to all the time, you have to balance the goals. So and I think it's fine. I like the idea of investing in the military if the purpose, if the goal is higher and larger and more important. And I don't think the financial reason would be a great one, because we know what happens at that point. Escalations begin, because you want to, the military industry, it's always hungry, and we're seeing it these days with what is happening with Lockheed stocks, for example. Um, Possibly having an internal defense industry, I think that's a strategic priority for whatever country. A word on this: we may, all of us have noted how Trump, what is going on in the last year, months that he's been in office with his new term. Many countries are fixing the diplomatic relations, simply purchasing weapons from the American military industry. Also, the Greenland thing, that's the bottom line. We're just purchasing, as Denmark, more F-35 jets, combat jet, and suddenly the Americans are fine with that, and with the Greenland thing. So it's to say, every country think it's a strategic to have a strong military industry, and of course it would be better to have a domestic one, an in-house one.
Okay, Simone.
Can I just
Yeah, please.
Can I add something? It's very important to remember as well that because Sweden was not part of NATO, Sweden was very well armed. And now that Sweden is part of NATO, Denmark itself has bought a lot from Sweden. Sweden has a massive surplus, and I dare say Finland too. So it's not like the problem is not the weaponry. I think Bernard was spot on. Again, it's not about weaponry. That is not the core issue.
Okay, but Simone, what do you think? Do you think that by investing in the military and putting so much money, 50 billion, at least in Denmark, and God knows how much in the rest of Europe, do you think that we are moving money away from welfare tasks, from tasks that are important to citizens, or do you think that now with all this, let's say, investment in the European economy, we're actually giving a chance for a lot of them to get out of depression? Because while Denmark, has the strong pharma sector, and that's what kept us floating, all our neighbors are suffering economically. They are all having depression for a couple of years now. We are doing really well, but everyone else in Europe is not. So don't you think it's a good idea that we actually use the defense system to revive the economy of Europe at the expense of welfare?
Definitely so. Well, that's the point. I do agree that we need to work on defense, but to expense of welfare, I think that's a classic and I believe often false political choice. Often you are placed in front of you with two choices, either or. But often in politics, it's not like that. You have a scale of grays that you can definitely navigate very comfortably upon. Right? So I really believe that the reality is that we can view defense and warfare as mutually exclusive. I believe that it's an interdependent investment. What do I mean with that? So I think it's important that we acknowledge that security is the fundamental infrastructure upon which everything else is built upon, right? Without security, you can't even build a country. You can't build communities. You can't build kids going to school, honestly, right? Which is, my opinion, what we really should focus upon, communities. If we don't have a stable and secure societies, as I mentioned, schools and hospitals and all the other social security nets, they can't really function. So, of course, investing in defense is essential if you want to have the stability for that welfare to make really sense, right? But at the same time, without being too political about this answer, there is a point in which you need to decide where to divert the funds. And the solution, I don't think, is to slash welfare to expand the economic engine, but you can actually found both. For example, if we focus on what it means to economically growth in Europe, we need to understand how we attract people in our countries and how to make them stay in our countries. For example, we have a lot of internationals here in Denmark. Where you can hear my political bias, right? But how do we make sure that they stay here and they don't move away from this place? How do we make sure that people move to Italy, to France, they don't go back to where they come from because they can't thrive? If they can't be part of a community, then the welfare can't even grow. So if you check at data, especially speaking about the country we live in, right? There is a belt of commune which are close to the biggest city centers like Copenhagen, Aarhus, and Odense, which without international residents, this commune will lose population. So international residents are literally the engine, are the boost of population growing. Population growing also means tax income that is growing, and that's exactly where you found the welfare. So once again, if the state decides to invest on defense while the regions and the commune focus on retain people, you can have both. You can have the welfare that comes from the smaller administration way of looking at society, and you have the defense improving the level we have through the state society. So I don't believe it's mutually exclusive, and we need both.
Super. Thank you so much, Simone. And now let's talk about Ukraine, because who's defending right now Europe is Ukraine, right? And Denmark has recently even signed a pact to halt Ukrainian arms production on their on our territory, on our territory. So Manuela, do you think that we should continue supporting Ukraine as our top security focus, even though it comes at a cost, right? We do send lots of billions, and those billions could be better used in Denmark, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We should continue to support Ukraine because if we don't, the costs will be much higher. And right now for Denmark, it feels high already because again, coordination. That's probably not the best thing to say, but let's just say we have three riders in that organization, right? We have 30 countries again, European Union, and some countries are contributing more than other countries. And that's why for those that are contributing, you have this conversation emerging. Oh, well, we're helping Ukraine at the expenses of the Danish welfare. Up to which point can we continue to do it? Well, the cost of not doing it is much higher. The cost of a potential Russian victory is much higher. However, that said, it is also not fair that only the countries that are either bordering Ukraine or in the Baltic region or Northern Europe are the ones footing the bill. Because should there be a military victory for Russia, that will be a problem for everyone, including for Portugal and Italy and the countries that are not directly involving or not contributing with their dime. So should we continue? Yes, absolutely. However, the model that is right now in force, it's not intelligent. It has to be redivided, and countries that are geographically detached from the conflict need to contribute as well. Otherwise, it becomes uneven and then it becomes a burden.
Thank you so much, Manuela, for your opinion on Ukraine. Simone, you are running, well, maybe you're already elected for the Billund City Council. I know we record this before the election result is out there, so it's hard to say right now. But you, as a potential local politician, you in Billund, would you be agreeing to have Ukrainian factories around in your municipality to build these
Yes,
weapons?
absolutely. Absolutely. So, yes, and it's not just an act of solidarity to Ukraine, which I think we all owe to the Ukrainian people that, we should help because they are Europeans like we are. But it's definitely a clear-eyed economic opportunity and necessity for a commune like Billund, but also like all the communes that also was mentioning before, they are peripheral to the big city centers in Denmark. It's not a secret that Denmark needs working age people in these regions because these people are moving away from these areas and they're going to the big centers, right? So we have a lot of the municipalities across Denmark that are struggling with demographic problems actually and workforce shortages. So if we talk about opening up new industries, especially for this kind of weapon industry for the Ukrainians to defend their territory and for Europe also to defend its own democracy, I see that as an opportunity to actually inject literally life and vitality on the regional economics and the local economics as well.
But
It
Simone, how
strengthens.
do you
Yes,
feel
go
that
for it.
those factories are owned by Ukrainians? Doesn't that mean that Russia will make your region as a area of interest
Yeah, definitely.
in
But
this war?
Def absolutely, absolutely. So, but again, I don't believe that that should be a problem. Like you shouldn't take decisions with fear, right? That's the worst way to take decisions. You should take decisions based on the principle you believe into. And yes, definitely, if you open up factories that can be considered military target, could be a problem for many people who could feel scared about it. But we have actually, if you talk specifically about Billund, which is the commune in which I live, if you look up north and south, we have two military bases, and in the south we have a military bases that stores the fuel that the Flamingo missiles that the Ukrainians are using is produced. So it, it is already a political problem that has been discussed and solved in my eyes, right? Um, but yeah, so I was saying that this choice will actually strengthen Ukraine's long-term economic resilience, and it will also link closer Ukraine to the EU. And we get also the knowledge and the expertise of a lot of people that actually fought the war and understood the logic on the mechanics in the industry of the war, like at the front. We have that knowledge. We need to have that knowledge because at the moment we don't. We have a lot of theory. We have a lot of, you know, let's say book and academic knowledge, but we don't have the expertise that these people actually build up in the battlefield, if you can call it that way, right? And it also creates stability for the individuals and the family that are building the new lives here. Because I imagine that when a chief chairwoman of the company will move to Denmark because she works here, then she will bring her family too. She will bring also her husband or wife and their kids. So these people, they come here to integrate as well. So I think it's also important from a demographic perspective.
Thank you, Simone. Bernardo, what lessons do you think we Denmark, Europe, can learn about from Ukraine about resilience and unity?
That we are tougher, stronger, and more robust than we think or we thought, but we're not that smart. We're not much smart. We thought back in the days, if you remember, the public debate around 10 years ago was like, if Russia attacks, we're doomed because we don't invest in the military, we don't have good armies, blah blah blah. Ukrainians have been holding and resisting for 3 years against a much more big, against much bigger country. Of course, we're not using, no one is using or talking about using nukes, nuclear weapon. In that case, it's the end of the world. So we leave it aside for a second. But the point is that for 3 years, Ukrainians would say for 9 years, they've been fighting and resisting. And apparently that was enough for now to stop the Russia military operation, war invasion, blah blah blah. So on that side, we're way stronger than we thought. We're not doomed. We're absolutely not doomed. There's military. We probably we're still way stronger than we believe. If only one country, amazingly prepared military, strongly weaponized and subsidized, but again, just one country managed to do that beyond the strategic and tactic masterpiece they're making. This about being stronger and tougher. On the other hand, we're not much smart. The whole world is trying to talk about peace, and you have 70% of the world population that is talking about peace. You have Trump, you have Xi, you have again all the other big countries, and we're the only one who are not sitting at that table. Because 3 years ago we said we will never talk to Putin, we will never sit at the same table with Putin. Trump is doing this, Xi is doing this. We can decide that we will never sit there. That we think that we should keep fighting until the war is won by Ukraine. But at some point, I think a peace will arrive some way somehow. And I don't think it's much smarter if we're the only one who are not sitting at the table asking for conditions or backing one side, Ukraine, simply because we don't want to. Because as we know, probably it's not going to be Trump helping out that much Ukraine in the negotiations. So if it's not going to be Europe, I don't know who's going to be.
Super. Thank you so much, Bernardo. Now we're going to move away from Ukraine to some other topics related to security because the Danish presidency also, when they refer to security, they talk about migration, they talk about cybercrime, they talk about energy independence. So Manuela, I know that a few years ago we were talking about Fortress Europe, and it was like seen as such a sci-fi such a sci-fi concept, but today it's becoming more and more real that we're going towards actually a fortress Europe. So do you think Europe can actually stay open and democratic while we are being more careful with our borders and improving our surveillance systems?
I feel like that is this topic. The interesting thing about this topic is that there's just so much misinformation and misconceptions related to it, false dichotomies, or create tension when actually that is not. First of all, it's very important to remember that all these digital surveillance mechanisms, the data that they collect, it's no different from the data that social media platforms have already been collecting from us for years. So if now we are worried about our data, I dare say we're about 15 years later on that game. But that said, though, another misconception is that border control is bad. Border control is important and it is necessary. What is bad is the misuse of border control. It is also proven that when people have trust in the border control, they are more open to immigration. They're more open to diversity because there is a trust that whoever has been allowed in has gone through some kind of screen. And the highlight here, I would say, is that there will always be some level of border control. So either we can do it or we can let the far right do it. And if the far right do it, then it's going to be a problem. But if you don't do it, then they will. So what we can and what we should do is do it in a healthy way, making sure that whatever screening processes are done based on democratic, clear, objective principles, and that marginalized communities are not deliberately chosen to be out. That can be done, and that should be done, because there have been examples when lack of border control ended up in higher levels of criminality, of gender violence, especially in some areas. So it is necessary, but it can be done with dignity, and it should be done with dignity.
Okay, no, that's interesting. So we're talking about dignity, talking about how we keep border control. Because to be honest, I don't believe in border control. I don't believe in borders in general. I believe that we should get rid of all borders everywhere. I still find it very funny that even though we're part of Schengen, we still have this temporary border control with Germany, which makes no sense whatsoever. It has no value whatsoever, in my opinion. I know that some of you might disagree with that, but I don't find borders useful. I think we as humans are born to look for our place in the world, so we should be free to do what we want to do. There shouldn't be limits put by various societies like, oh, this is our place, we're born here, you cannot come here. I think we should just go and do whatever we want to do at any point of our life without having to consider anything. Yeah, I feel like I want to go to the Saharan desert and I don't want to be stopped by any borders on the way there.
Well, but that would mean to also assume that you can take whatever you want to the Sahara Desert, and maybe you will bring with you things that they don't want you to bring.
But why shouldn't I have the freedom to do that?
Because countries also have the autonomy to decide what they want and do not want. And
Yeah,
then
but countries are made of people.
yes, but at the end of the day, what you're creating here is a dichotomy between national sovereignty and individual freedom. And that is a much deeper conversation.
Yeah, of course, of course. I'm a big supporter of individualism and of personal freedom, and I feel like countries is such a 17th century concept. I think we live in a much more fluid societies today that change, and just simply at some point these countries will just have the name left and nothing else.
But can individual good outweigh collective good? Or should individual wellness outweigh collective wellness?
Depends here where you are as a liberal, right? It's a political choice here further on in the discussion what you choose. Simone, what do you think? We as citizens, can we keep Europe safe? Do we have a role in that?
We have the most important role. I really believe that the polarization, especially online, right, digital polarization and division, it's actually the biggest security risk we have in Europe. Much more than the external factors. The internal factors are what really can make us crumble without even us noticing, because you don't see drones flying or explosion in the sky. You just lose the trust in the society. Imagine also how much people dedicate to democratic participation. How many people are gradually not going to vote and not participating into democratic life. That's a problem to me, because it really shows that people don't have they don't really feel that that they can trust the system. They don't put the community at the center of the discussion. So yeah, that and how to treat others is also something that I know it sounds very simple, but I really believe we should improve in that. I come from a country that has 3 volcanoes, many earthquakes, and a lot of what do you call it, landslides. And then you need to see, and I hope you don't need to experience that, but you have to see how people come together when these things happen.
Simone, don't you come from Italy?
I do.
Okay, I didn't know
We do have
Italy
tributaries.
had. Okay.
If not more,
you
actually, maybe
you
four.
show me like a very exotic country.
No, no, Italy
And
is geologically it's a disaster. You wouldn't imagine
yeah,
how many natural disasters we have on a geological standpoint. We have had over the last forever.
Okay.
yeah.
Well, Bernardo, now
I
that
just learned that Bernardo is Italian as well.
yeah,
Are
yeah,
you? Oh, amazing. Ciao, caro.
Ciao,
Bernardo,
Caro.
if to wrap up today's talk show, can you can you give a message to the EU leaders about what do you think makes people safe? Like, what do you think should EU leaders do to make us feel safe?
To make us feel or to make us safe are two different questions, and I will
Feel
tell you
safe,
why.
feel, because we need to
Feel
perceive it as
safe
well.
everyday life. Perceive it everyday life as simple as that. We do not live our lives thinking that much about long term perspective or wider picture or larger pictures, not as much as we do about daily things. And let's make this example. If we have Third World War due to Russia and all the things happening, do you think it's going to be more dangerous to live in Denmark, the chokehold of the Kattegat, or Spain? 100%, 90% it's going to be more dangerous to live in Denmark. Are people moving from Denmark to Spain or vice versa? Why? And because Denmark, it's perceived as, and it is, I believe, not only Spain, Italy as well, many other countries, Southern European countries. Denmark is a safer place in the everyday life. Here, you don't risk, give or take, to be assaulted, harassed, raped, robbed, whatever. And that's what, for most of the people, it's safe safety. It's about their everyday life. There's another level of safety, which is which would open a huge door: the war, diplomacy, climate change, landslide. It's something very relevant in Italy. But at the end of the day, I think that people feel safe if they think they can wake up and go to work or uni or school or pick their kids or go to have a beer and come back at 2 in the night after an evening with friends in a pub without having to holding their keys as a weapon in their hands or so on. So again, that safety is something different, but perception of feeling safe, I think that's about everyday life mostly.
Super. Thank you, Bernardo. Now, Simone Manuela, do you have a last phrase or last words that you would like to add to Bernardo's statement towards the EU leaders, the MEP that's going to watch this?
I do, if I can, Manuel, if it's okay. Maybe about hopes and worries, if it's okay.
Sure, whatever you want to tell them.
Yeah. So I really hope that Europe can start to make people fall in love about community participation and democratic participation again. I really believe that that's actually the strongest antidote, considering the the security threats that we are presented with daily. I really think that we start to think long term about this and not exclusively talk about economy or military investment, because it is important, but it's not the only part that is important. Bernardo also, he just mentioned the everyday life. It's a topic too. It should be a topic. And if people don't feel that they belong in a community and they feel that there is some kind of division between their cluster and the dominant cluster of their own society, then people don't really stick together, they don't feel home, they're not going to do the effort needed in their private life to actually make feel people belonging to somewhere and actually thrive for having kids and make them grow in a community that really cares. So that's my hope. And my worry is that we keep on ignoring the digital polarization that we have, especially on social media, of course, and the political fatigue that it takes to people to follow through what happens in their own countries politically. The fact that it's, kind of desperate in its eroding whenever you follow politics close, and therefore people don't fall in love with that because it takes too much. It just uh, another bad thing to think about, so I really hope that will be two topics, speaking about hopes and worries, that the Europeans can talk
Thank
about
you,
more.
Simone.
Yeah.
Manuela?
Uh, I would say we need to make a final decision on what we want Europe to be and define a blueprint. And those who do not want to comply with that then should ask themselves if they want to be part of it. We have countries that are part of EU but don't behave as such. If you are part of a union, if you are part of a federation, then you need to comply. You need to dance according to the song. Otherwise, if you want to play along, then you just play along. You can't be here to benefit on the things that are good to you and say, I have nothing to do with that when it's not good to you.
Super. Thank you so much. Very strong message at the end, Manuela. Thank you, Bernardo, Simone, Manuela, for participating in this talk show. It was a pleasure to listen to you. And now we go on to our fourth segment, where we're going to hear what the Danish EU presidency has done these past 6 months. In this next few minutes, I'll walk you through the key developments that have shaped EU's security landscape in recent months, from the high-level meetings that happened in Copenhagen to commitments made in Brussels. There's no surprise, Russia's war in Ukraine has dominated Europe's security agenda. So right from the start of the Danish EU presidency, they have fully backed that they will continue to offer military and financial support for Ukraine, and that was actually the cornerstone of EU security. In August 29, Denmark was a host for the EU defense ministers, and that's where they coordinated aid for Ukraine and they strengthened Europe's own defense readiness. A key note from there is that when the Danish Minister of Defense, Troels Lund Poulsen, he said that in the fight for Europe's freedom, we must be standing behind Ukraine and warn that any hesitation only benefits Russia. And this weren't just words, EU countries have been jointly procuring ammunition and arms so Ukraine can persevere. Well, we also learned from their wartime innovations because we have to improve our own defenses, and that's what we have done. In fact, actually, I don't know if you have seen the latest news, but Denmark and Ukraine signed an agreement where they will establish actually Ukrainian weapon factories on Danish territory. Probably the biggest theme for this presidency was the fact that Europe should take more responsibility for its own security, right? So when the EU leaders gathered on October 1st in Copenhagen for this summit on defense, they discussed on how Europe can defend itself and how it can stand united against aggression. That's where Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen opened with this strong message: we cannot take our freedom for granted. Europe must be able to defend itself. And she called for cooperation to turn words into action. So the sentiment is clear. After decades of relying heavily on NATO, the EU now aims to become a stronger military player on its own right. Of course, still part of NATO, but more self-reliant. We cannot depend on others to defend us. So by 2030, we need to be able to defend ourselves and actually produce our own weapons. So concrete steps are definitely underway to reach that goal. In November 26, the EU member states representatives have agreed on a new defense omnibus legislative package to cut red tape in how you procure security and how you build the defense industrial base. Danish presidency officials, they hailed this ambitious deal. They call it a next step to further boost the EU's defense readiness towards 2030 and an important step towards Europe that is able to defend itself. In the words of Denmark's defense minister, this package will speed up everything from arms procurement to launching new defense projects to ensure regulations made in peacetime won't hinder Europe's ability to rearm in an emergency. In short, Europe is serious about getting faster and smarter at building up its military capabilities. Another priority, of course, has been supporting Ukraine by pressuring Russia. In October, the leaders have agreed on a 19th round of sanctions against Russia and committed to cover Ukraine's financial needs for 2026-2027. So they discussed from where those money should come from. So one idea was to tap into Russia's frozen assets, and I think that's where they haven't agreed yet. They will discuss again in the mid-December, but most likely they will decide that they will use Russian money to actually fund the war against Russia. It's very important to note that the Danish presidency has worked really hard to keep all the EU countries on the same page to support Ukraine. Even Hungary got to agree on the sanctions against Russia. So Europe is also strengthening its own defense plans. At the October 1st Copenhagen summit, leaders, they made a timeline, they made immediate priorities to decide, okay, how do we reach EU defense readiness by 2030? The most urgent needs identified were, of course, improving Europe's air and missile defenses and reinforcing the eastern flank of the Union. This was lessons from the war, of course. Ukraine's experience has exposed gaps that Europe is now intent on closing. For instance, countries are coordinating investments to strengthen anti-missile systems and to jointly procure large-caliber ammunition. By learning from the conflict and pooling resources, the EU is moving now towards a more interoperable and capable European defense. So to sum up, the past months under Denmark's EU presidency have seen strong momentum on security and defense. We had all these high-level meetings in Copenhagen and in Denmark in general, and they all send clear signals that Europe is upping its defense game. Denmark has used its presidency to push for unity in Ukraine, for faster military upgrades, and a Europe that can stand on its own 2 feet security-wise. The message confident. Europe is determined to defend itself and its values, while Denmark is a capable and trusted captain for this past 6 months. Of course, someone else will be leading Europe in the next 6 months, but while Denmark was in charge, a lot of things have happened in a positive way. Thank you for listening and see you in the next episode.